My father-in-law didn't know that I was spending $10,000 every month. He told me to leave the house, and he said it calmly, like he was discussing the weather, not dismantling my life. We were standing in his immaculate living room, the one I'd quietly paid to renovate. His wife avoided my eyes. His younger daughter sat on the stairs, fingers laced, already imagining my absence. He told me they needed the space, that family was growing, and I was no longer essential. The word temporary hovered in the air, unsaid but understood as a lie. I remember the hum of the refrigerator, the way my chest stayed strangely still. No shouting. No pleading. Just the soft realization that every bill I'd covered, every silent sacrifice, had trained them to see me as furniture, useful, replaceable. I nodded. I even thanked him. What he didn't hear was the quiet click inside me, the sound a lock makes right before it seals forever. I married into their family quietly, the way I did most things. No grand wedding, no loud declarations. Just a promise and a shared understanding that stability mattered more than spectacle. My husband traveled often for work, and when his assignment stretched into months, I became the constant presence in that house. I paid bills without announcing it. I fixed problems before they became conversations. I learned early that being dependable makes people comfortable enough to stop noticing you. My father-in-law liked to think of himself as the pillar of the household. He enjoyed giving advice, enjoyed being deferred to. I let him have that illusion. It cost me nothing to stay silent, and silence had always been my strongest habit. Growing up, I learned that people underestimate the ones who don't argue back. They assume quiet means weak, that calm means compliant. His wife was polite but distant, grateful without gratitude. His younger daughter treated me like a placeholder, someone occupying space she believed was already hers. No one ever asked how the mortgage was being paid, or why the lights never flickered, or how a household with strained incomes never seemed to struggle. I never corrected their assumptions. Letting them believe I needed them felt safer than letting them know they needed me. In private moments, I told myself it didn't matter. That contribution didn't require recognition. That love, or something like it, would eventually even the scales. But neglect has a rhythm, and once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Being taken for granted isn't loud, it's a slow erosion, grain by grain, until one day you realize you're standing on nothing at all. After that conversation, the house shifted in small, almost imperceptible ways. Doors closed a little faster when I entered a room. Conversations paused, then resumed without me. At dinner, my father-in-law began speaking over me, not aggressively, just enough to remind me I was no longer central to the table. When I offered to cook, his wife would say, "Don't bother, we're keeping things simple now," as if simplicity required my absence. The younger daughter stopped pretending entirely. She left brochures for nearby preschools on the counter, circled listings for starter homes on her phone while sitting across from me. Once, she asked, too casually, how soon I thought I'd be back on my feet. Her eyes flicked to my hands, empty of groceries, empty of proof. No one raised their voice. That was the clever part. Disrespect wrapped in civility is harder to confront, easier to deny. When I paid the utility bill one last time, my father-in-law remarked that expenses seemed lower lately, that tightening belts built character. I watched him say it with a satisfied nod, unaware he was complimenting a cliff edge. At night, I lay awake listening to the house breathe, the pipes, the distant traffic, the muffled laughter from downstairs. I realized they were already rehearsing life without me, confident nothing essential would change. They mistook my calm for surrender, my silence for consent. And with each small slight, something in me sharpened. Not anger. Precision. The kind that comes when you stop hoping to be seen and start deciding how you'll be remembered. The turning point didn't arrive with a fight. It came with a spreadsheet. I was sitting at the small desk in the guest room, the room I was being eased out of, reviewing my accounts out of habit. Mortgage payments, utilities, insurance, renovations, groceries, school fees I wasn't supposed to know about. $10,000 a month, flowing out as steadily as breath. I paused, fingers hovering over the trackpad, and for the first time I asked myself a question I'd avoided for years. What happens if I stop? Downstairs, my father-in-law was on the phone, confidently promising his daughter that everything would be taken care of. I listened to his voice float up the staircase, certain, authoritative, built on money he believed came from somewhere else. From anywhere else. That was the moment I understood the imbalance wasn't emotional, it was structural. I wasn't being pushed out because I was unnecessary. I was being pushed out because they thought I was harmless. A resource that wouldn't retaliate. A background system that would keep running even after being unplugged. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. I closed the spreadsheet and began another one. I listed what was in my name, what was automatic, what required my approval. There were no dramatic gestures. No ultimatums. Just quiet reversals. Cancelled transfers. Paused payments. Scheduled moves. 2 days later, I called a moving company and packed all my belongings exactly as instructed. As I sealed the last box, I realized something else. This wasn't an exit. It was a transfer of power. I planned the way I'd always lived. Quietly, methodically, without witnesses. Years earlier, I'd trained as a financial analyst before stepping away for family. Numbers were still a second language to me. I knew how money moved, how contracts breathed, where obligations ended and assumptions began. Most importantly, I knew what wasn't legally mine to carry anymore. Every account I funded was in my name. Every automatic payment required my authorization. I reviewed agreements line by line, not with resentment, but with detachment. I documented everything, dates, amounts, confirmations, saving copies to a drive that would leave with me. If questions came later, answers would already be waiting. I didn't announce changes. That would have been theatrical, and theatre invites resistance. Instead, I let systems do what systems do when support is removed, falter slowly, then fail. I scheduled the final payments to clear before I left, just enough to appear generous, just enough to avoid suspicion. After that, nothing would bounce dramatically. Bills would simply arrive. I updated my address, redirected my mail, separated my digital footprint from theirs. I arranged temporary housing under my own name and confirmed my moving date with the same polite efficiency I used at work. When the movers asked if anyone would be helping at the house, I said no. It felt accurate. The night before I left, I walked through the rooms one last time. I touched nothing. I took nothing that wasn't mine. My revenge didn't require taking, it required releasing. By the time I turned off the lights, everything was already in motion. Quiet. Irreversible. And completely within my rights. The consequences arrived the way weather does, gradually, then all at once. 3 days after I left, my phone lit up for the first time. I didn't answer. I could picture it anyway. My father-in-law at the kitchen table, envelopes spread out like unfamiliar cards. The polite confusion. The recalculating tone. A call to the bank that ended with longer hold times than dignity allows. By the end of the week, the house would sound different. No hum of certainty, just the scrape of anxiety moving room to room. I heard later, through someone who still spoke to me, that the utilities hadn't been shut off immediately. They never are. Companies send warnings first. Grace periods. Opportunities to fix things. My father-in-law mistook those warnings for proof he was still in control. He told his daughter not to worry. He told his wife it was a clerical error. Confidence, when unsupported, becomes a performance. The real moment came quietly. A declined payment at the grocery store. A contractor refusing to continue work without a deposit. A bank officer explaining, slowly, that income had to be verified. Each conversation peeled something away from him. Authority. Certainty. The role he'd rehearsed for years. No one ever accused me directly. That would have required admitting how much I'd carried. Instead, there were vague messages. Did you change something? I never replied. From my new apartment, I watched the city breathe at night and felt something settle inside me. Not triumph. Relief. The kind that comes when the truth finally gets to speak for itself, without you saying a word. My husband called first, his voice cautious, as if approaching an animal he didn't understand anymore. He asked what had happened, why his parents sounded frightened, why everything felt unstable. I told him the truth, Calmly. I listed what I had paid, what I had stopped paying, and when. There was a long silence on the line, not anger, not accusation, just the sound of someone realizing how wrong they'd been about the structure of their own life. His parents didn't reach out again. Pride has limits, but it also has a breaking point where people choose narrative over accountability. I heard they told friends I'd been confused, that finances were complicated. Reputation is often preserved by omission. I didn't correct them. I no longer needed to be understood by people who only noticed me when I was gone. What changed most was me. For years, my sense of worth had been tied to usefulness, how much I could carry without complaint. Watching everything unravel without my involvement forced a harder truth into focus. Being needed is not the same as being respected. And respect, once withheld, rarely arrives late. Why should anyone care about a quiet financial unraveling in a family home? Because it's familiar. Because many people reading this have been invisible labor holding something together, waiting for gratitude that never comes. This wasn't about money in the end. It was about choosing to stop subsidizing your own erasure, and learning that walking away can be the most honest thing you ever do. In the weeks that followed, my life became quieter in a way that felt intentional, not empty. I settled into routines that belonged only to me. Morning coffee by a window no one else claimed, evenings where silence wasn't a punishment but a choice. For the first time in years, my bank statements reflected my values instead of my endurance. Every dollar had a purpose. Every decision had my name on it. My marriage didn't survive, not fully. Some fractures form long before they're visible. We spoke respectfully, even kindly, but clarity has a way of rearranging love. I wished him well and meant it. Letting go didn't feel like loss, it felt like accuracy. I thought often about that house and the people inside it, not with bitterness but with distance. They had mistaken generosity for obligation, silence for consent. I had mistaken patience for virtue. Those errors cancelled each other out, and what remained was a clean ledger. The future, I realized, didn't require revenge or validation. It required boundaries. I returned to work on my own terms, consulting selectively, choosing projects that respected my time and expertise. I built a life where contribution was visible and mutual, where no one benefited from my presence while planning my absence. There's a particular peace that comes from knowing you didn't raise your voice, didn't break the rules, didn't become unrecognizable to win. I didn't take anything from them. I simply stopped giving, and in that silence, I finally heard myself.